I'll never forget when I first got accepted into the University of Florida. My stepmother, who was 7 months pregnant at the time, and I started screeching and doing the jig around our kitchen. I swung her around so fast, I thought my unborn little sister was about to fall right out. At that moment, I knew I was going to the University of Florida. According to the rankings, it was the most prestigious institution to accept me, the first-generation son of Jamaican immigrants. So why not? The status of a school that deemed me worthy became integral to my self-worth. With a college acceptance, I finally had bragging rights and a better chance at social mobility and security. For many students of disenfranchised backgrounds, higher education is a tool of liberation, the key to leveling the playing field. I thought there wasn't anything else to investigate. I am here because of rankings. But I wonder if the rankings want me here. In the US News & World Report, one of the heaviest weighted ranking criteria factored into a school's overall score is reputation. Researchers Gatfield, Barker, and Graham suggest reputation is important because it captures the perceived excellence of the university, the type of excellence which brought me where I am today. And how the US World News calculated the 2019 best colleges, it is mentioned reputation is calculated through surveying university administrators, high school counselors, and other experts separately and averaging those results to gain an expert's opinion on academic excellence. This is intended to serve as a measure of prestige. I believe I am the expert of my own experience. Since I became a student, I've quickly learned this idea of prestige is not rooted in the challenges I face as a Black student navigating a middle-class, predominantly white institution. I've learned cultural lenses are a real thing, and my Black lens, my everything. I then began to ask more questions. Is prestige me sitting in a focus group with high-level university leadership and a student comfortably saying how they would never step foot in an area of town where Black students and locals are often segregated to for nightlife? Is it that same student saying it's disgusting over there and no one blinking an eye? Or is it me visiting the affluent student living areas of town and getting called the N-word? Is prestige Black graduates getting assaulted on stage during their ceremony? Or is it me studying public health and not having one Black instructor during my time in that program, even though health outcomes in the US tend to be the poorest for low-income Black and brown communities? These are examples of psychological trauma. Are they measured in your rankings? Let me tell you what's not in the rankings. The rankings have no measure for the student experience. We all experience college differently, and this cannot be measured in models used by college rankings today. Predominantly white institutions are historically structured to serve those who they have served in the past. Students like me are forced to participate and uphold these structures, often at our own expense, because obtaining an education is a matter of survival for us and our families. For us and our families. For me, a college degree was sold as a means of liberation. If higher education was actually liberatory, we would all contribute equitably. Instead, we see higher education rankings upholding systemic power and privilege rankings built on elitism, and rankings which make it harder for Black and brown students to get accepted. And once we arrive, we wonder, are we only here for diversity numbers' sake? This approach to measuring prestige creates an environment where tokenization thrives. Worse yet, the burden falls on students, not the institutions, to create spaces for marginalized groups to grow and feel included. Creating these spaces has unfortunately become the primary responsibility of student groups focused around marginalized identities. We become reliant on student activism to validate our experiences in these institutions. Don't get me wrong. I believe student activism and creating spaces for ourselves is an important skill to develop, especially resilience building for when the going gets tough. But context matters. There's a difference between resilience building because of racism as compared to failing an exam, especially when I'm paying for a prestigious higher education experience. An experience which doesn't care about my experience. I'm going to be scared when a notable white supremacist who preaches ethnic cleansing and incites violence announces their arrival on my campus. I'm going to be angry when leadership, students, and professionals begin to preach a hug thy oppressor rhetoric. I'm going to be exhausted when I deliberate for weeks on whether or not I'm going to engage in protests to make sure it is known that hate is unwanted in this community. The cost of this emotional labor is expensive. For energy going towards processing the effects of oppression, decreased energy in academic pursuits and professional development. For every dollar a college puts towards aligning more competitively with ranking criteria, a college is lost in campus initiatives to create equitable and safe environments. These campus initiatives create the student experience. As I approach the end of my time as an undergraduate, I must admit I am grateful for all my experiences, good and bad, for how they have developed me into the person I am today. I thank my access to counseling services to this positive outcome. Institutions need to be doing better. Here's how. I asked rankings to define a measurement which takes into account the experiences of marginalized groups. Let's redefine prestige to mean the best celebration of humanity, one which doesn't leave anyone behind. Universities are powerful. They develop the way we think, they create the next leaders of tomorrow, and they fund the next greatest discoveries. I envision a world where prestige is defined in this context to take into account the voices of those which weren't prioritized. Don't get me wrong, I'm not asking for colleges to forget about ranking criteria or to strive to be less competitive. But I am asking that they prioritize the most at risk. This is social justice, and it needs to be at the core of these systems. Students, before you can thrive, you need to make sure you can survive. Look for institutions that will celebrate your existence, denounce hate, and promote justice-oriented intercultural exchange. Peers play a role in one's experience as well, and this is where resilience becomes a key factor. As my little sisters continue to develop into their Black consciousness, I hope that their college experience will truly be prestigious. Thank you.